course. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host, Travis McNeil, and today I am joined by my good friend Jason Cesna, aka Max Power on Twitter. So what we're going to be doing today is we are doing, I'll call it a little recap on the greatest 50 matches in ECW history list. When that list got posted, Jason had some thoughts on some of the matches that were on there. Some he agrees with, some he disagrees with, which we'll get to. But I figured he is the perfect person to shoot the breeze with for, the next little bit to run everything down. So I've talked about it in the videos before, how my introduction to ECW was a lot different than a lot of people's might be. Living in Canada, we actually didn't have any exposure to ECW until the TNN program started in '99. So ECW was almost like this cool little like taboo thing for me, where I'd follow it in magazines and I'd see the bloody pictures and the sexually explicit photos of all of the women in ECW, and it was something that at that point of me being a wrestling fan, just prior to the Attitude Era starting, that was something that I was kind of looking for in my wrestling. So it seemed really cool. I'd talk about it with friends, but nobody really knew what ECW was either in Canada outside of, hearing it. But my friend Jason here, Milwaukee, Wisconsin area, you had ECW. So tell me, how did you get into ECW? How did you find it? And what are your earliest memories you have of watching it?
Well, a lot like you, most of my early ECW knowledge was from like Pro Wrestling Illustrated and that family of magazines. And we didn't really get ECW here in Milwaukee until '99, at the same time that the TNN show started. But in 1997, we got a satellite. We got DirecTV, which had the Sunshine Network and the Empire Sports Network. I think that's the one out in Buffalo, and they showed ECW. So that's when I really started watching it weekly, was like in the summer '97, pretty much right after Raven left. And so from then on, it was just, gung ho.
Yeah, and that's, well, I mean, we'll talk about you. Sorry, my mic just disconnected, so I'm gonna plug that back in. All right.
All right.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Great, and we're back. I'll cut all that out. But what we think is peak level ECW, but that kind of 97 point, that's where ECW is really starting to gain momentum kind of on that national level, right? They were officially on pay-per-view. They had the angle on Monday Night Raw that kind of got them out there. They were starting to incorporate, some WWF guys with the WWF Invasion with Lawler. And for better or for worse, they were starting to lose some of the wrestlers, right? So you'd have, like you said, Raven turn up on WCW, and these guys start to jump ship. But I feel like, as much of a detriment as that was to ECW, that's kind of where it started to really get the name out there more. So that's I think a really cool time for you to kind of be able to get that exposure. Did you watch the pay-per-views at the time too, or was it just kind of strictly what you could see on TV?
The first pay-per-view we were ever able to get is WrestlePalooza '98. I think WrestlePalooza. Yeah, the one from Cobb County, Georgia.
Yeah.
Which was the coolest thing ever, seeing a live ECW show at the time on cable. But in reality, the show was,
yeah, it's not a very good show. But
my one main highlight of it is Sabu, like 25 minutes into that half-hour match with Rob Van Dam, just puking his fucking guts out in the middle of the ring. Just it was great.
Yeah, I don't want to say like I feel that kind of sums up ECW a little bit. Not Sabu puking, but the idea that at the time this show was the coolest thing that we're finally able to experience. But then watching it back later, you kind of go, it's not great. And that's what I thought of ECW when I really started to be able to dip my toes into the classic stuff. Like I had, I had the TNN run. I watched all of that. I watched a couple of like the last few pay-per-views. I got November to Remember 2000 and Guilty's Charge 2001. So it was like right at the end there. But then I didn't have the internet. So I didn't get the internet till 2002. And when I did, I immediately got into tape trading and I immediately started searching up ECW, right? And I found that the stuff that was the more like pure wrestling or like the lucha libre stuff or like the Van Damme matches or whatever. That at that time is what I felt held up better than the hardcore story driven angle stuff, right? And I think maybe that's because we just got through a lot of that with that Attitude Era. But watching it now for this project, it was the complete opposite for me. Where, sure, like your Guerrero and your Malenkos and your Van Damme and your Lynn's and your Rey Mysterio matches, they're still really good, and there's a lot on this list. But like some of those just classic like Raven matches and Tommy Dreamer matches from that 95, 96 era, those were by far my favorite things to watch. And it was so good too. This was the first time that I actually watched all of the hardcore TV leading into it. When I got into tape trading, I really like cherry pick just the full shows, right? So I'd watch like the commercial releases of the ECW arena shows, but you lose all of those promos and all of the TV buildup, and they pay off so much of that in so many of the matches, predominantly the one that ends up being number one on the list, right? And I feel that if you don't watch that TV, and this is how I felt at the time, like I saw that match and like I know like Scott Keith gave it 5 stars, and I think like Meltzer gave it 5 stars, and all of these guys that would tend not to, talk about ECW too favorably had said that that was the best ECW match ever, and I watched it and it was kind of like, was it though? But then
Yeah, I mean,
watching it
out of
back,
context, it's still like a great garbage match.
yeah, well,
But without the
that's
context, but with the
that's
context.
that's just it, right? Like it's okay, it's a fun brawl, but you don't get all of those pieces that put it together that make it the absolute masterpiece that I now think it is. Watching it with all of that moving pits. So I really don't have much of a format. I figured we could go through the list. I know you have some comments on stuff as we go. We don't have to touch on every match. Something that I'd like to hear from you throughout it is, if there's a match that you thought I rated criminally low that should have been up higher, call it out. If there's a match that's ranked really high that you're like, that match is a piece of garbage, it shouldn't even be on the list, call that out. And I know you've got a couple in mind. Also, too, I don't know if you've put any thought into it, but if there were any matches that didn't make the list that you feel should have that you can think of offhand, I've seen them, right? I watched pretty much everything ECW for this list, so that's something we can get some discussion on as well. So really, I mean, we could start out at the bottom and work our way up, whatever
Well, before we do that, I just want to say that, about the ECW not holding up thing is that I think that the peak late 94 through mid 97 ECW just holds up tremendously wonderful. I think the best way to watch that is through the TV shows.
Yeah.
Week to week, the storyline going through that. I mean, you miss a few things by not watching the full show, but you get 90% of what you need just from watching those TV shows. 97, when I first started being able to watch ECW weekly, I went on the internet and I made a deal with the guy for like $250, and he sent me every single TV episode from mid 94 through mid 97. And so I just watched those over and over and over and over for years and years and years. And yeah, so that's pretty much how I got all my ECW knowledge or whatever. It's just from rewatching those tapes over and over and just, not studying it, but enveloping myself in the ECW-ness.
Yeah, that old era where we would send money orders to strangers on the internet for a bunch of VHS tapes that we would hope would turn up.
Cross my fingers for 6 weeks, and they show up, and a big box shows up, and it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, the mother load. And it's funny, like you mentioned, rewatching those over and over again. And that's kind of what I did. Again, no internet, so no tape trading ability. But I remember when they started doing the Pioneer releases, I had like a local independent video store not too far from my house, and they got in Barely Legal in Anarchy Rules 99. And those were that they actually, I had the guy that worked there, he was a little bit of a wrestling fan too, and he ordered them in for me. And because I rented them a couple times, and he was just like, hey bud, like I can get these for you so you don't have to keep renting them. And I watched those front to back so many times, Anarchy Rules especially. So those are two pay-per-views that are really near and dear to my heart. And that was really the only classic, well, I guess not so much Anarchy Rules because it was part of the TNN era, but Barely Legal was really only that classic ECW footage that I had for a really long time until 2002. But I think part of it too, you mentioned that kind of golden era holding up. I think for me, when I first started to get into it around 2002, like we'd seen all of the kind of goofy hardcore stuff throughout the WWF, but I'd also started to get into deathmatch wrestling at the same time. So by comparison, I also felt like all of this stuff that was so cutting edge in, 95, 96, violence wise was now a little bit tame. And anything from like the storyline perspective, I'd gotten kind of sick of that. And I'd started to move into independent wrestling more like the Ring of Honor stuff or, CZW for the hardcore stuff, right? So again, by what was going on at the time, I was kind of like, maybe ECW doesn't hold up, but watching it in 2020, 2021, there's nothing even close to it now, and it's so good and it's so episodic too.
So I've been watching some old CZW from the beginning, and I'm in like early 2001 right now, right before they go to the arena, and the shows are much more violent, but the storylines make absolutely no sense. They make no sense at all. From show to show, it doesn't make a bit of sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
it
no
has its charm,
cohesion
but
whatsoever.
like,
Yeah, yeah, and those are like that's peak like cherry picking wrestling for me too. Like
mhm.
a lot of that early indie stuff, right? That 2000, 2001, 2002 to an extent stuff now, same thing. You can't watch those show to show because I feel like it's promotions almost trying to copy ECW in a way, CZW being a perfect example of that, and not having the creativity or the cohesion or the ability. It's something that Paul E was always really good at was if he would lose a wrestler, which would become, happen all the time in the late 90s, he would be able to move things around and to keep things compelling despite, Raven going away. And he would use those like segue angles so well, right? So you look at Raven's last match at WrestlePalooza 97, how it immediately segues into the Jerry Lawler stuff, right? And I feel that that's something that he was really good at doing, but independence, if you lose somebody because they get signed or get injured or take a Japan booking or or somewhere else or you can't afford their flight for that month, if it's early 2000 indie stuff, right? These promoters would be right. These promoters would be screwed and they wouldn't be able to do those moving bits as effectively as Paul Lee did. So, and I think that's why, in a way ECW holds up a lot better than a lot of that stuff does now watching it, 25 years later.
Well, plus they had like the production knowledge and capabilities to do things behind the scenes, to make up a story instead of just like, in April, this guy's supposed to be there in May. Now May is here and the show is there and he's not there. So what are you going to do?
Exactly. Yeah. You could shoot everything in between and stuff like that. It's not like these guys are, out there across the country, making towns and taking bookings and everything like that. And you don't have that ability if they're not in the arena, the one time a month that you run it. So that's a really good point. But yeah, if you want to get started on this list, wherever you want to pick up, we'll work our way from the bottom up, I guess. So whatever's the first one on there that you want to talk about, we can go for it.
Eliminators and Dudleys, that's 48, huh? And that's from Barely Legal, huh?
Mm-hmm.
See, I never thought that was much of a match myself, just a collection of really cool spots, but I mean, that's fine. Now,
So
one thing I'm really happy to see here is Sandman and Mikey Whipwreck. Now, I don't know if that's the title change or if that's the match before the title change or
that
what.
one's the title change. So that's the one that was officially labeled as a ladder match at the ECW arena where Mikey won the belt.
See, my favorite one is the one that turns into a ladder match because that one is just like there's 5 or 6 instances in that match of the Sandman just like picking up a ladder and just doing something with it. Like he just, how about that? And like there's no forethought, there's no being careful, there's no taking your time. It's just thought, do it,
Yeah.
And a lot of matches that does not work for the Sandman, but in this match it just brilliantly does, and that's just a fantastic match.
Is that the one with the rafter spot where Sandman comes down from the
I
rafters?
believe so, yes.
Yeah, that's that whole program that they did with Mikey and Sandman, I think is so good. Um, and I feel like that late 95 into the 96 match with Cactus, that's the end for me at Mikey Whipwreck. Outside of like the stuff with Tajiri many years later, but that's kind of the peak and the end of him being like a compelling like underdog character. Um, and I feel like they did it so well with the Sandman, how they did the Singapore cane angle, with Mikey in there in Florida, where they had like the referee, like I can't remember, it was Jim Molyneux or whoever it was, like saying, to the Sandman, hit me with the cane instead. And they have like, the production staff and the timekeeper coming in there because, poor Mikey, right? He's this kid that's about to get
Here
destroyed.
comes Bob Ortiz to save the fucking day.
You're right. It's so good, and it puts so much sympathy on Mikey. And then you have, the public enemies, segments with them trying to like toughen Mikey up and take him to the streets and everything like that. And I think too, and I could be like mixing up some memories, but I feel like prior to that ladder match, there was like a backstage, well, it was outside, but a skit with him and the public enemy where they like hung like a 6-pack of
Climbing the
beer up in
tree.
a tree.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the ladder match.
And by the
It's
end of it, Johnny Grunge is shit faced because he drank
yeah.
all the beers.
Exactly, and it's so good. And the feud that they had with the actual matches, they were all great. This was the only one that ended up on TV not being clipped, so that's why I ended up putting it over the others. Because the other ones, they have, all of those great spots, but it kind of feels more like just a collection of like spot clip, spot clip, spot clip. Whereas this match, it only runs like 6 or 7 minutes. It's pretty short, but they do enough crazy stuff, and it's so reckless. Like you said in the other ones too, there's a spot where Mikey just chucks the ladder at Sandman's head, and it splits Sandman open. And Sandman does that stupid spot he does where he lies the ladder over the guardrail, and he just runs and does like a pescado over the ropes, like onto it to kind of like teeter totter it into Mikey's face. And the whole
So
thing
what
is
we
just
really need is a Sandman versus Sadika. Just find out who the most
the-
reckless wrestler of all time
there
is.
we go, just throwing ladders at people and throwing light tubes into the crowd, and just
Yeah.
let Sandman get drunk, let Sadika get coked out, like the bear that John Wayne Murdoch referred to her as, and see
Mm-hmm.
who's the toughest. That should be ICW No Holds Barred. The most like problematic, strung out wrestlers of all time. Just put them in the cage and let them do what they want to do and hope for
Hey,
the best.
in the pit, they only fight. That's what I hear.
That's it. And then as far as the Eliminators and Dudley's match is concerned, you're absolutely right with that. That is a collection of Eliminator spots, but the crowd is so hot and everything comes across so well. And again, I'll say my list, right? So my opinion, but that's a match being on that barely legal commercial tape and it being the opener of that show that I watched it so many times. And I sometimes think that like matches
And it's
will
a tone setter.
that's exactly it. It's one of the best openers ever, I think, for what it accomplished. Just to get that crowd completely molten, which they would stay for a lot of that show until Shane Douglas and Pitbull would kind of stink up the joint a little bit. But it was perfect for what it needed to be. And if you were somebody that had never seen ECW before that ordered that pay-per-view, like that's the best introduction possible. And it makes sense that shortly thereafter, Perry Saturn, would move on for greener pastures because he's just phenomenal in that match.
All right, so here comes my first complaint of the day. I don't know how many times he's on the list, but every time I see it, I'm like just shaking my head. And it's kind of odd timing because he had a pretty good match last night with Kenny Omega, but Christian and Shelton Benjamin at 44, just the whole any WWE ECW stuff, except for one notable exception, being on here is just like sacrilege, just sacrilege. And there are enough ECW matches to make a quality top 50. If you want to make a top 50 WWE ECW, well, the thing that used to say on CCW fans, or unknown power, or whatever the hell it was, whenever you would put in that WWE ECW, would put in the word filter. Oh,
Yeah.
God, I wish I remember what it was. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, boo. So, and Christian is a fine, good, solid wrestler, but I mean, okay. But next, 42, Raven and Cactus versus Dreamer and Funk, November to Remember main event. I mean, I think that's criminally underrated myself, but that's been a personal favorite of mine. Like one of the two first ECW shows I bought from RF Video online was Hostile City Showdown 95 and November to Remember 95. And November to Remember 95 I watched like 800 times at least. And that match just peaks and peaks and peaks, and then they fight some more after the match, and then it ends with bloody ass Raven standing there covered in barbed wire, and Stevie Richards is like, he's cool, but ew. And like, man, that's That's peak ECW to me right there.
Yeah, that match in particular is another great example of where I think that watching it in the context makes it so much better. And I remember that being one of the first kind of classic ECW matches that I remember seeing when I got the internet. Like that was a pretty easy one to find on like Kazaa or whatever file sharing service there was. And I just thought it was like this messy kind of garbagey brawl that kind of ended with like an inconclusive ending. And like you said, it's almost like the end of Blair Witch where Raven's just kind of standing there and like the show cuts, right? Like it doesn't feel super fulfilling, but watching it now, you don't really see those plunder brawls anymore where it's just everything possible that I can find to hit somebody with.
We
That's
filled
what
the
I'm gonna
shopping
do.
cart with a bunch of crap.
Yeah, and Terry Funk is so good in that match too because he's so reckless, just throwing things into the ring and hoping it hits people. Though,
The one Sherry throws and just hits Raven right in the back of the head.
yeah,
I want to know, did they plan that? Because that's just
I don't think they could have because I mean
that's
Raven is a crazy man, but I can't see anybody agreeing to crazy
well,
old Terry Funk just hurling a
took
chair
two
from 10
pieces
feet
to
out.
the head in that match. So I mean,
True, true.
and
It's
the
it's
gimmicks
it's
were good that night.
yeah, it's funny we say though, like from where I'm sitting, I can see a November to Remember 1995 poster in my basement. So, just that show right now, I think is maybe the quintessential ECW show because it's right from when the promotion I feel started to get super hot and go on that run throughout '96 that it would have. And that main event is just it's so great. The promos leading up to it, I love now that it kind of ends just as this out of control thing that nobody can kind of get control over, and it holds up so much better than I thought. The thing I really wish would have been better with that match though is the spot with the Eric Bischoff t-shirt.
Ah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's so cool in 3, and I actually remember reading about it in Foley's book before I ever saw the match, and I'm like, that sounds amazing. But they
Yeah.
don't get a really great shot of it. It's good enough that like you get the gist of what they were going for, and obviously the live crowd loves it. But I really wish they got like a proper hard cam shot of the shirt over Foley's head with the blood on it. But
Hmm.
what can you do?
They do make up for, or he does make up for it with the lovely Faces of Fear shirt that he has on over that.
Yeah.
I mean, mwah.
I wish I could buy that shirt. It is
Oh,
tremendous.
uh, I don't know any bootleggers by name,
Yeah.
or I would call them out now and say, "Hey, make one."
Yeah. I don't know. MLJ always has these like old bootleg 95 WWF shirts. So maybe he's got a hookup he can direct us to. I don't know, to get a airbrushed Faces of Fear shirt. We'll be on the lookout for that. I'll touch on Christian real quick. I know this is the controversial, pick on my list or all of these Christian matches. You know, ECW legend Christian.
Former ECW World Heavyweight Champion Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. Dare I say, one of the best ECW champions of all time, if you include WWE ECW in canon. And basically, so this was my thought when I was doing this list. Initially, I wasn't going to include anything post the death of ECW. But I really felt like I needed Awesome and Tanaka from One Night Stand 2005 on there. So then I thought, do I include the one night stands? But if I include One Night Stand 2005, do I have to include One Night Stand 2006, which is officially the start of WWE ECW? I mean, there's a Kurt Angle versus Randy Orton match on that show, right? So it kind of just snowballed where I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to do ECW, I'm going to include the WWF stuff. I don't know how much of it'll make the list, but I know it's going to piss, some ECW traditionalists like yourself off. But I mean, the thing with that match from TLC with him and Benjamin too, it's a really good ladder match. And outside, and we just talked about Sandman and Mikey being a ladder match, but outside of the 4-way one they did at Guilty as Charged 2001, I don't think there was another ECW match where it was actually a ladder match with a belt hanging. They did the Stairway to Hell matches, but like Sandman and Mikey ended with a pinfall. The Eliminators and RVD and Sabu matches ended with a pinfall. So I think that, not so great one from Guilty's Charge was kind of the only bring the belt down from the hook ladder match, aside from Christian and Shelton Benjamin. And they do a really good, really underrated ladder match. But I understand the criticism, and I'm sure we'll get back to that criticism when it comes to Jack Swagger later on in this list.
I didn't even think of Jack Swagger.
Yeah.
Now I'm just sad.
Jack Swagger tends to do that to people.
He does. I mean, ever since he got rid of that eagle, it's kind of like, why? Why are you still around?
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on here. And, sorry, I went on the wrong one. See if there's anything left on the bottom page. Oh, DX, Kaitai DX, Sasuke, Hamada, and Naniwa being the one that's from Massachusetts.
Yep.
I can't remember if it's Boston or it's Massachusetts.
I think it's Revere.
Okay,
Might be Revere
right.
Mass. Yeah.
Yeah, that match is so awesome. That match is so awesome. I'd like it better than the Barely Legal match myself.
Yeah, that one for me is a little bit of a toss-up, and I actually watched them both again because when I was doing I'm just watching everything, through ECW. I preferred the Hardcore TV match too, but then I tried to like order things on the list, and I took what I thought would be like my top like 60 or 70, and then rewatched them because I'm obsessive and wanted to be comprehensive for this list, and then I ended up preferring the Barely Legal one again because of one, the crowd, and two, the performance of Yakashiji, which we can talk about that later. But yeah, this one is so good in Massachusetts, and I love it because the crowd has no clue who these guys are whatsoever, and I feel that at the ECW Arena one at Barely Legal, one, the crowd was able to see the Hardcore TV match to get a little bit familiar, but you also have smart fans in that audience, right? That, maybe there's people out there that know what Michinoku Pro is, that have seen, the footage, seen, Meltzer put it over in the Observer, whatever, right? But that one in Revere, I really don't think the crowd has any idea who these goofy guys in masks are that, might as well be Power Rangers out there. And they blow them away with that.
And
match.
that's kind of reminds you of the Dragon Gate at ROH in 2006, when people had heard the names and people had, seen things and heard a few things, but you never saw really any clips because there were no clips back then, really. Yeah. So once they started doing their shit, people were like, oh my God.
Yeah. That's a perfect comparison. Those matches I think you can put side by side for the influence that they had on, that style in the US. So it's a great match.
Oh yeah. All right, so next, oh, Scorpio and Eddie Guerrero. That match is great. Wasn't that three-way dance? I think?
Yeah, that's three-way dance. Yeah, the title change.
I love that match. That's just, I don't really have anything to say about it, except it's great. It's smooth. Scorpio was completely underrated back then. Might still be underrated today, and Guerrero was Guerrero. So Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn are number 39, and I couldn't tell you which match that was. All their matches kind of blend together to me, and they've never really been my favorite thing. They're pretty dry and acrobatic table spotty matches, which are fine, but kind of lack the thing that I love about ECW, which is just the wildness. There are wild parts to the match, but they're all pre-planned and well put together, which sometimes is cool, and sometimes it's like, all right, yeah, reverse, another reverse. Okay, now into the table. All right, yeah, I get it. Okay. Right.
Yeah, they're very much the antithesis of the Sandman and Raven and Dreamer and Pitbull and that 95, 96 Reckless era, because like you said, there's some crazy spots that these guys do, and sometimes they end up coming off Reckless, like Jerry Lynn smashing his face at Hardcore Heaven, off the pavement. But you're right, like they're much more choreographed and set up, and it's not so much of I'm going to run off the ropes and splash on a ladder and have it swing back and hit you in the face, as they are, you're going to duck this chair shot and jump over this chair shot and this and that. So I see it, and those are matches too where, again, I flip-flopped on them so many times because 99, that was the cool shit, right? Like, and then it started with that Hardcore Heaven match. I had never really seen anything like it. Two guys that athletic, but adding in that hardcore element, because the hardcore divisions in the WWF and WCW at the time were guys like the Big Boss Man and, Hardcore Holly and Test, and in WCW you had Bam Bam Bigelow, who's great, but at that point in his career, maybe not so much. And, Norman Smiley, who's an incredible wrestler, but at that point, was a comedic wrestler. So, you'd kind of like see these kind of, okay, we're going to walk around, I'm going to hit you with the garbage can lid, and then we're going to go do a funny spot. But to see these guys, take the athleticism and incorporate it into it was really, really cool. But then the early 2000s, when I started to watch the stuff again, it didn't hold up at all. And it came across so contrived to me, right? But now, again, watching it 20 years after that, it's cool again to me. So I think it really depends on the context of what else is going on in wrestling to compare to those matches. That one that's the lowest on the list, that was the one that they did at Living Dangerously '99, where they went
their first big one.
That was their first big one. So they'd done some stuff on Hardcore TV. That was really the first big one. They went to the 20-minute draw. Really weird post-match where the referee tries to award Jerry Lynn the television title, despite the fact that they went to a draw. And
Jerry Lynn never has happened in professional wrestling ever.
So and they didn't even establish it pre-match that, if it goes to a draw, the challenger will win for some reason.
Or it's the referee's decision or some shit like that.
Yeah, it really seemed like a not super well thought out idea, because the game plan with that was to establish Jerry Lynn as the lovable loser, right? Where, he's too nice, he's too much of a good guy to accept the title that way.
Well, they got half that right, but
yeah. But they agree to the 5 more minutes, and then Van Dam kind of quickly puts him away with a Van Daminator. And that would lead to no time limited Hardcore Heaven in the series to continue. A couple spots up from that one, though, I also have their match from the ECW arena that aired on TNN in '99. So a couple of weeks after the Hardcore Heaven one.
Yeah, it was on Hardcore TV, but not the TNN show, correct?
This one was on TNN, and I think it might have aired on Hardcore TV as well.
That one was probably their best, in my opinion. That one had some organic feel to it.
That one was the most like story kind of driven, I'll say more traditional pro wrestling match out of all of the ones that they did. Lynn had bad ribs coming into it. So basically the storyline that they were going is that the Impact players jumped Jerry Lynn backstage so Lance Storm could slide in and take the title shot instead. That ended up being a schmoz with Johnny Smith coming out because he was supposed to fight Van Dam at Anarchy Rules. Before Balls Mahoney took over for that in quite the substitution.
Johnny Smith was in and out of ECW 3 or 4 times and then just disappeared.
Yeah, really, I don't know what the deal was with him. Johnny Smith is someone that I think most wrestling fans, that aren't old timers like us, probably have no idea who he was.
I think you can only lie to the airports about having a dead relative so many times in here to get in the United States. So once a year,
That's it. But they ended up having Lynn save RVD, and then Van Dam basically be like, do you want to do this title match we were supposed to do? And they have a great match, way less, flippy-do spots, because, Lynn was selling this rib injury the whole time. They do a really good spot where they go through a table at ringside, and they start stretchering out Lynn, and he gets off the stretcher and comes back in to finish the match, but then ends up just eating the Van Daminator again, which would ultimately, put him down pretty much every match that those guys would have. The Van Daminator would spell the end. So, but it was really good too, and it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that you think that's maybe their best match, because I think that, if you're someone that's critical of the other matches that they did, that's going to be the most accessible for you. But if you're someone that prefers the other matches, that might be the one that you find the most underwhelming. It just really depends on your style, but I think they're all worth watching.
Actually, I think probably the most underwhelming is one I was actually at, which was Hardcore Heaven 2000, which had the interference by Scotty Riggs.
Yeah.
And
Scotty Anton.
Jerry Lynn Jerry Lynn finally got his big win with the help of, what did they call him?
Scotty Anton.
Scotty Anton. Okay, I thought he had some dumb catchphrase.
He was the clapper. The clapper.
It
was clapper. He'd do the clap.
Yeah.
Because STD jokes were so funny in the year 2000, right?
I am being sarcastic now. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. That's enough, Jerry Lynn.
Yeah, that's enough for those guys.
Yeah. Okay, next underrated Raven and Terry Gordy, number 37. See, to me, that is a top 5 ECW match of all time. Just from Terry Gordy's entrance to the match to just how the pops just keep on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, of course, if you include the post-match Raven and Sandman angle, which I do, it is to me top 5.
It's so funny that you say that, because in my video that I did for that match, almost word for word, I said the same thing. Where if you include the post match, which I didn't for the placement of this on this list, but if you include the post match all together as a whole package, it's one of the best ECW segments of all time, bar none. The match itself, though, is amazing. Like Raven, I feel was really well protected in ECW at that point. And just, for the 7 or 8 minutes that the match goes, like I don't think he gets an offensive maneuver in until the end.
No.
He just lets Terry Gordy kick his ass from pillar to post. And like the stuff with the barbed wire where it's just all caught in his hair, like it's brutal. The visuals are great. You know, if you're someone that, watched World Class or watched, early 90s All Japan, it's really cool that Terry Gordy got that moment, because that would kind of be like the last really big moment he'd have before he died, right? So it's someone that I think, Terry Gordy is, people love him, but I still feel that he's really underrated because he's not somebody whose name you hear a lot, talked about nowadays. So it's really cool that he kind of got that little cherry, on top of his career. But that whole thing is great, and the post match, with the angle with Sandman's son, and it's also even the stuff too with like Beulah, getting like the "She's Hardcore" chant for the first time and stuff. Like everything about it, it's just perfection. It's so good.
And an underrated thing of that is Raven saying that Tommy Dreamer's sperm is much too weak to ever sire a child.
So good.
Sorry, Tommy.
Yeah, I think they have 2 girls now. So I mean,
That's
in
Tom
vitro is a
Laughlin.
hell of
That's
a
not
thing.
Tommy Dreamer, as we know from Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea. Two
two
different,
two different people.
totally different things. RVD and balls. So yeah, I mean, I remember that being a good, weird main event match. But I think that's one of the few times balls is on here. If there might
That's I can pretty much guarantee you that is the only Balls Mahoney match that shows up on the list.
see, I
And
might have, if I was going to use a balls match, I might have done. I think there was a Detroit Dudleys versus Balls and Spike, and that might be the first one where they used the fire in '99,
yeah,
and that's such a wild crowd and a
yeah,
wild match. And when it ends, it's just like, oh my god!
yeah.
And they tried to recreate it, 3 or 4 different times on pay-per-view, and it always sucked.
Mhm. So when I was doing this project, right, the other thing I was doing is I had my whole ECW collection, and I was kind of like digitizing and cutting out matches that I wanted to keep and moving them to a hard drive. And that one you mentioned, and I think you're right, it was Detroit. That's the only one out of that feud that I ended up keeping, because it's perfect. And you're right, every other time they would try to do it, it didn't come off as good. But
That also happened with Balls and Tanaka against the Dudleys, where they did that arena match was
Mhm.
just fucking awesome.
Yeah,
And then they tried to do it like another 2 times on pay-per-view, and
it
just
just yeah, it didn't work. And I find like the Dudleys in that like 97 going into 98 era, I think they're so good. And that's when, they were starting to, incite the riots, and, Joel Gertner was getting more filthy with his limericks and things like that. And they were hitting 3D on everybody and taking guys out of the company, and, ending Beulah's career and everything like that. But when we got to late 98 into 99, I became really sick of the Dudleys on this rewatch project, because it was the same thing.
it's just more.
It's just more, okay, now we've got thumbtacks on the table. Now we've got a flaming table. Now we've got a flaming thumbtack table. Now we've got 2 stacked flaming tables, right? Like it's
My thing is just the introductions just got longer and dumber, and yeah, I want to hear you call women in the crowd a slut for 10 minutes.
yeah,
Yay.
and that stuff too, that like at the time it was so edgy, and now you kind of watch it and you're like, I let a
Even in
lot of
'99, I was over that.
yeah, I let a lot of like ECW stuff go, because I'm like, oh, it was, the times, right? Like it's, obviously it's not PC, but some of that stuff I'm kind of like, yeah, like especially the spitting on the fans and whatnot. Like I don't know. It's not for me. But with Balls though, like I feel that Balls was a really underrated guy that unfortunately got saddled with he got saddled with Axel Rotten. And Balls, I think, superior wrestler to Axel Rotten. Later on, he'd get saddled with Tanaka, which didn't really gel super. And that's not to discredit Tanaka, but I feel like that team came across as being thrown together. And like you said, their matches with the Dudleys outside of the one where they won the titles, they never really hit. And then they saddled him with Spike Dudley, which again, Spike's an over character, but after that it was Chilly Willy. Like I feel like Balls was just moved from partner to partner to partner to partner. Yeah, and it would be on that downward trend. That's exactly right. But the guy could go in singles matches, and no better example of that than the matches with Van Dam, and they had a couple of good ones too. The reason why I went with the one at Anarchy Rules is it seems like a random main event at the time, but it's really good, and it's a great RVD showcase too. Where if you've never really seen RVD from that era, he hits all of his stuff in here. He does the Van Terminator. He does, the Buffalo Bam Bam Bigelow dive into the crowd. He gets crazy height off the 5-star. They do a lot of counter sequences. There's a Van Daminator. There's a bunch of Fonzie interference with him rolling through with chairs and Trio Woe with the chair and all of the ridiculousness. So
His
it's
comeback in AIW's made me so happy.
oh,
He's
it's
just a
so
sweet
it's
guy.
so great. I love Fonzie. But yeah, I feel like that's why that match got included because it's maybe the best match of Balls' ECW career where he's actually able to show that he's more than just this plunder tag team wrestler, and it's also a great Van Damme showcase. So I think as a whole package, it works really well.
All right. Awesome Tanaka, 8298, Heatwave 98. I mean, that's a fucking awesome match. So thumbs up. Pitbull 2 and Jericho, same thing. I mean, that's that Heatwave show right there. I think you got another Heatwave one right in this area. The Rob Van Dam and Sabu match. Oh, yeah, 30 and 31. I mean, those are two great matches, and also Raven and Terry Gordy are on that show as well.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a hell of a show. And then
I
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say I think that series of a matter of respect 96, hardcore heaven 96, Heatwave 96, and the Doctor is in. I think that like 4-show stretch of ECW arena shows is probably the best stuff ECW ever produced because you have all of these big kind of angles, with like the stuff with Sandman's son. You have all of this storyline angle stuff. You have wild brawls like Raven and Gordy. We'll talk about another brawl that I know you love in a little bit. You have, the Jericho kind of work rate matches. He had stuff that's not even on this list. He had like a great match with Mikey Whipwreck that didn't make the list. He had a great match with Scorpio that does. He had the match with Pitbull number 2. Pitbull number 2, just in general, being used in that period, it's a guy that's super, super limited. That if you watch his matches during that, you're like, why was this guy not a world champion in the WWF or WCW? Which is crazy to think about knowing how the story of the Pitbulls go. But you watch him in that match with Jericho doing a gorilla press into a tombstone, and you're like, this dude is unbelievable. You have all of the Van Dam and Sabu matches. You have some of the hottest ECW arena crowds I think there ever was. And you have the night Kimono Wanalea dance atop the ECW arena. And I mean, you take all of that, and I don't think anything touches that period. So you're going to see almost like a little bit of a bottleneck where there's just a bunch of those matches, all of a sudden on this list because it's all so good. But it's also kind of hard to weight a lot of them over the others because it's a lot of the same guys kind of doing the same matches, just with little twists on them here and there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing with fall of 96 ECW, like when Furnace and Crowfat come in, and it seems like a lot of tag team matches that take quite a little time with them. Sabu and Rob Van Dam, Gordon Williams, and the Eliminators. It's just kind of like a glut of unnecessarily long tag team matches that aren't my exact cup of tea because I want to see people hit each other with shit.
Yeah.
Do cool promos and bleed, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so let's see here. So Tanaka Awesome 12:31:99, another great match. That's the one where Awesome won the title back, I
Yeah,
believe.
that's the one where we won it back.
And
Reverse super bomb off the top rope for the
that
finish.
and the Christmas show might as well just be the same match, and that's not
Yep.
an insult to them, but all their matches are kind of very similar to each other, just different things. But those I like more than the like similar type of match that like RVD and Lynn is, because those matches are wilder and they're crazier. And if you're gonna do wild and crazy, do wild and crazy.
Yeah, and one thing that I find incredible about those matches too, and I have so many of them on this list, although they're all the same type of match, dudes getting powerbombed through tables and hit in the head with chairs, they escalate the violence in all of them, and they throw in all of these different twists off their spots where it's okay, I did a power bomb this way in the last match, so now it's going to get countered and I'm going to have to do it in a different way. Or it took, like, even just the escalation of chair shots on Masato Tanaka, where what he no sells one and gets put down with the second at Heat Wave, and then at Anarchy Rules he no sells two, so Awesome has to do the diving one off the top rope. Like they increase it, and that's why we'll talk about One Night Stand after, but I think that's their magnum opus. But yeah, all the New Year's and the Christmas ones are two of my fondest ECW memories, because that's when I was getting into the show, and they were my first title changes I got to see. I loved Masato Tanaka just from what I'd seen on them on there, and they're great. But like you said, I have the Christmas one much higher on the list
Yeah, see.
for different reasons. But like you said, they do bleed into each other, and they kind of go hand in hand, and they're great.
And the one that's different out of them is just because of the weirdness of it all. And it was the Anarchy Rules one with Taz at the start of it. And I was lucky enough to be there for that one. And that's one of my favorite matches of all time. Just I was there. So,
Yeah.
but that's one where they threw in the little twist that you didn't think was going to happen. It was supposed to be Taz versus Tanaka. And all of a sudden there's Mike Awesome in the crowd. And, I think people at the top of the pay-per-view got spoiled with the Jeff Jones thing,
Yeah.
the guilty as charged. But I mean, the crowd had no idea what was happening until he just walked into the ring. Like, what the fuck is that? Why is Taz yelling at somebody in the crowd?
Yeah.
Because he'd already gotten booed and stuff on his way out to the ring by the crowd and the "you sold out" shit. So it just seemed like he was just getting mad and yelling at somebody. And then Awesome hops the guardrail. It's like, holy shit.
It had this like wild, unpredictable nature to it, which made it so cool. And I mean, Paul Lee's used that device a few times of having the champion be eliminated, at first in a three-way dance. But the fact that it was Taz, this guy that like had been so well protected for years, to go out 4 minutes into that match,
Just
and
the
then
audible gasp when he got pinned. You can still feel that on TV.
oh, it's incredible. And even like Joey Styles like deserves a lot of credit for his call of that too, being like, Taz is eliminated. Taz is eliminated, like just like when it kicks in his realization. And just it being like this awesome like passing of the torch, where it's Taz bows out and you have Tanaka and Awesome that are going to be the new face of the company, and obviously that doesn't quite happen with Mike Awesome, going to WCW, but just the fact that they then get to go ham and do their style of match. You get the Taz handing over the title to Mike Awesome at the end. It's really cool, and it, like you said, it sets it apart from the other matches. For you being, I didn't know that you were live at Anarchy Rules. So for you, and again, different for me because I didn't have the internet. Did you know that Taz was going to the WWF? Were you privy
Yes.
to all of that?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Everybody knew.
so did you like come in with that resentment towards him? Were you also like, yeah, fuck this guy, he's sold
Nah,
out?
I've
Or
never been like that.
yeah,
I mean, everybody go everywhere. People switching federations was, a thing that you looked forward to back then.
mhm.
I mean, I didn't see as ECW as being screwed. Plus, I knew that like Raven was coming in, so the day was saved already. Go away, Dudleys. Go away, Taz. We got Raven now,
Yeah.
and everything's gonna work out just fine.
Yeah, then you start to turn those down as things actually play out. But
Yeah, not much 99 2000 content on this list.
uh, that's for good reason.
Yeah. No, but that was one of the best shows, I've ever been
Oh,
to. Just a completely wild atmosphere. I mean, just that whole show is stacked. From Storm and Lynn to Credible finally beating Sabu,
yeah.
and Raven tripping on the ropes, getting into the ring, and then posing there with a shirtless man cow. I mean, no, maybe he did
That's-
have a shirt. Maybe it was some other guy who didn't have a shirt, but still, man
that
cow.
whole thing was a segment, that's for sure.
Oh Lord, but
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? All right. So I was looking for Douglas and Cactus Jack at number 22. See, I've always been a bigger fan. I don't know if that's on this list of the. Oh no, that is Cactus Jack, Mikey Whipwreck
It's
match.
that one's
That's number
high on the
5.
list.
That's
Yeah.
that's a great match. The Douglas Cactus Jack. Douglas is kind of hit or miss with me. He has some really great matches. Like I'm sure the Too Cold Scorpio one is on here still.
Yeah,
Yep.
oh yeah,
Number
it's high
7,
too.
that's a fantastic match. And but he was hit or miss. Like we were talking about Pitbull number 2 and how over and how awesome he was in the summer of '96. Well, by Barely Legal '97, it was over and people were done.
Yeah.
Like it had just been so long and he never got that victory. And he always kept on getting beat, and then he got beat again. And it was like, well, that 1-2 punch, that and the whole steroid thing a few months ago, and that was the end. I mean, that's literally like the last memory people will have of the Pitbulls, except for maybe Pitbull 2 coming back and getting dropped on his neck by Taz.
Yeah.
But as good as it gets, I think, and that being it for them. Just sad.
So here's a question that I have for you, and I wonder if we agree on this. Do you think that ultimately Barely Legal happening in April of '97 instead of November to Remember '96, which was originally supposed to be the first ECW pay-per-view before, the whole mass transit thing kind of derailed all of that. Do you think that they should have pulled the plug on everything that they had planned for pay-per-view? Because I think Pitbull and Shane is a great example of that, where you had this really hot feud throughout '96. That if you blew it off at November to Remember with Pitbull beating Shane Douglas, I think that's a nice little cap. Same thing with Sabu and Taz, right? If that finished up at November to Remember '96, rather than be delayed to Barely Legal, those are two matches that I feel really cooled off before they actually had the match itself. And both of those I feel were the low points of what was otherwise a great pay-per-view in Barely Legal. Do you think that that was a mistake that Paulie saved those matches for pay-per-view?
Yes and no. I mean, I think they should have blown off the Pitbull and Douglas thing because they brought in Rick Rude in like January, and then that just muddied the waters even more. And so now Douglas's top feud was with Rick Rude, not with the Pitbull.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they were going to do something, they should have just had him win there. Sabu and Taz. I don't know if it cooled down so much as they did like 5 break apart brawls or whatever you want to call them, pull away brawls. And by the time they got to the match, it's like, all right, okay. But I mean, when you rewatch that ECW TV just before Barely Legal, I mean, you can't help but be hyped for the Taz match and for that 3-way dance. I mean, because that's one of the best wrestling TV shows of all time.
Oh, 100%. I think that the three-way dance is incredible, and it just missed the cutoff for this list. I really wanted to include it on there, but yeah,
Well, if you hadn't put all those WWE ECW matches on there, you could put on whatever you want.
right. But Taz and Sabu, that's it. I don't know if it was a matter of just the match itself couldn't live up to the hype, or just what they did in the match wasn't great. Like if they just had an off night. I've never really been able to put my finger on what led to that match at Barely Legal being a dud.
It should have been more of a hate-filled brawl, bloody brawl, instead of a tough wrestling match. I mean, they had hated each other for so long and didn't touch for so long that it needed an explosion.
Yeah.
Double juice, 8-minute. We throw each other through everything and both act like the Sandman. We'll apologize to each other in the back afterwards. Let's just go out there and kill it. Well, they just kind of did a match, like
Yeah.
maybe a chapter 1. This is chapter 1 of our story. Well, the storyline was already on chapter 10.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I
that's
agree with
kind
you
of what
there.
I feel. The WrestlePalooza match is better,
Oh yeah.
but not like they never really meshed all that great. I think maybe their best one might have been when Taz became Shane Douglas's hitman back in like '99 to trick him into giving him a title shot, and they had a Taz Sabu match on ECW TV where he just gives him the back suplex through the table.
Through the table.
That one
Yeah.
is just awesome.
That one's good. I liked the last one they had on pay-per-view too. I think it was maybe Guilty or not Guilty as Charged, Living
Living
Dangerously 99.
Dangerously.
Yeah, that was the they did like the unification for that in the FTW title. And I thought that
Finally.
that was more of a like spot, table. Like there was a lot more going on than just, them kind of, Taz working Sabu's neck, with a chin lock sort of thing. So,
I'm the better man, brother.
yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned the Douglas and Cactus Jack match too. That I'm also with you on Shane Douglas, where I maybe like him more than I should because of that peak time where he was great and he had the great Scorpio match and the great stuff at the four-way dance at Heatwave, and he kind of had the edgy promos coming back from being Dean Douglas, and they paired him with Francine, and like she was hot at the time, and everything like that, right? But the reason why the SummerSlam 96 match with Cactus Jack makes it is it feels like Shane is working super hard in that match, like way more than he normally would. He does a dive off the top into the crowd like he's Rob Van Dam, and he does all of these things. And I thought they did like a really good job with Mark Curtis as the referee, and it was the original handcuff with the chair shots, and that's where they did the Mikey turn on Cactus.
Oh, that chair shot.
Oh, it's sickening.
Oh,
so it had all of these little bits, and it's where it's kind of different to me than Raven and Terry Gordy, where it had all of these extracurriculars, but after the final bell, where I'm like, TV show wise, it's as perfect as you can get for something, but here all of the ups and downs happen during the match, so that's kind of where my numbering comes from. But it's worth another look if you haven't seen that one in a long time. Especially if you're not super crazy about Shane. He's got his working boots on, and it's really good.
Well, Shane is good until like I think late fall of '96 when he's just too beat up, too roided up, and kind of like this is what I do now. He got kind of into the routine of swearing and punching and kind of just he started being a brawly guy instead of a good wrestler, probably because he was so beat up he couldn't be a good wrestler anymore.
Yeah.
Then in like early '98 he had like 5 injuries at one time, and then that was pretty much it.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I watching the TV, I feel like everybody really kind of sullies on him a little bit when he was the champion but not defending the title when he had those injuries. And I guess that's why they ultimately had the FTW title for Taz, to kind of make it that Taz has this world title that he's going to defend instead. But I really don't know why they didn't kind of shoehorn in Taz to win that belt from him instead of having him do a match with Al Snow and all of these other things while he was injured. Again, I feel like Paul Lee, and I talked about this earlier of him adapting well to the times, when he had to. I feel like he was also stubborn with certain things when he had a vision in mind where he's like, this is how I want this to play out. And sometimes he would wait too long, like we just talked about with Barely Legal. And it's funny you mentioned Douglas too, like really slowing down end of 96 through 97 through 98. I consider the match he had with Justin Credible in 99 to be a miracle match.
Oh yeah, SummerSlam. Yeah.
Yeah, because that is one that I feel should for both of those guys. Yeah, Justin Credible, was getting super pushed and he was good-ish. Like, he had the good matches with Lynn. But he felt like it's so funny because I remember like at the time I kind of liked Justin Credible, but watching it now, he's so uncool. And I say that kind of lovingly to, Justin Credible, but like just his catchphrase and the fact that he's with Jason and Nicole Bass and like all of these weirdos, and like it really doesn't do him well. The storyline later where he's champion, where he's talking all sexually and you think it's to Francine, but he's actually like talking to the title about it. Like it just makes him seem like a loser. And I find that like you take all of that and you take a super limited, super roided out, post injury, going to WCW, so clearly not really caring anymore, Shane Douglas, and you put these guys in and they beat the hell out of each other. Shane Douglas, like, I don't know if it's because he was playing a face, and God knows is the last time he did that in ECW, where he just decided to go out with this incredible babyface performance. Like, I don't know.
It's been like 3 years.
Yeah, but that match is so good, and it's one of the better performances of Shane Douglas's career, and just the timing of it is so bizarre to me that they were able to pull that match out. But it's a hidden gem for sure.
I was lucky enough to be at Shane Douglas's "I Quit WWE" speech that happened at the Break the Barrier show at the
Ah,
arena in
yeah,
'99. Oh, he started off the show by being like, "Paulie, fuck you! I ain't gonna be at that pay-per-view tomorrow," and he wasn't.
yeah.
And the crowd's like, "Yeah, fuck ECW. Where are we? ECW arena? Oh shit,
Oh,
yeah."
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think people are just happy to see something happen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hey. So yeah.
That's a weird show looking back on it now.
Oh, the weirdest, just the weirdest. I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, I still remember walking past the CZW table, and Zandig was standing there with I don't know who it was. My mind now is Nick Gage and Justice Payne, but I don't know for sure.
Probably
But it,
TCK.
probably TCK. He doesn't even have a fucking cage match profile. He's wrestled like for 2 years for CZW, and like, just one day he's gone, and that's the end of
Yeah.
TDK or TCK or whatever the hell
TCK.
his name. TCK. I don't know. But they had this little CRT TV set up showing little videotapes of, the Pyramid of Hell or whatever had just happened. It was just this grainy, camcorder shot tape and just garbled screaming and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, all right, thanks. And
Yeah.
quickly walked away.
Yeah, all of that early like '99 CZW stuff. I remember like seeing the clips on Kazaa and LimeWire and all these things, and it felt like a weird, just kind of like a snuff film, like with how it was shot. Like,
Yes.
what am I watching? I probably shouldn't be watching this. Are these guys alive? Is this real? I don't know. And
And
I
at the
guess that
time,
was
I
the
hadn't had too
appeal.
much exposure to anything more violent than ECW, like a
Yeah,
clip or two. I don't know if Stranglemania was out quite yet or if I had gotten it. It was soon in this time period, maybe a little bit after, but you just see like it's this dark arena where the tables are on fire and people are jumping off stuff, and you're like, huh, well, I don't know about that
yeah,
one.
yeah,
And now I'm watching people like
yeah.
shred each other with light
I was gonna
tubes
say,
and
look at
jump
us
on
now, right? Like,
scissors and look
yeah,
at us now.
yeah.
Who'd have thunk it,
Gusset
right?
plates, yeah,
Not
yeah,
me.
yeah.
All right. Well, let's get going on this. But RVD and Holly, come on, give me a break. I mean, though him getting his back sliced up,
Yeah,
cool,
it's
cool.
really good. And I'll say this real quick about that match. That is a match where if it happened in the ECW arena, I think it really would have gotten over. And the reason I say that is because Hardcore Holly, the fact that he has hardcore in his name, he would be a guy that the ECW crowd would resent. But I totally feel like he would have earned the respect through that match by tearing up his back. And he
So in a
like,
way, the ECW unit crowd were him, and he was Cody Rhodes, and he had to earn their respect.
there we go. There we go.
Tying it
But
all together.
yeah, it's a really gutsy performance from him that I think like almost sacrilege to you, I'm sure, but it almost embodies that old ECW spirit, and I think it holds up better than a lot of people might give it credit for. I'll say
I think he was just on a few of extra Ken Kennedy pills that
that.
night.
Well,
Don't beat me up, Bob Holly. All right, Raven, Sandman, Pitbull 2.
this is
Fucking
your match. This is your
this is
match.
my match. Was a Matter of Respect 96. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the hottest 5-minute period in ECW history. If you think that the Jitto, Ghetto, and Impact Players match is hot, this match is fucking double hot.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as he hit that DDT on the guardrail, the fans thought this is the night. And which is pretty amazing he was able to do that after the Sandman after completely fucking his knee up, on that leg drop attempt where he only gets one leg out and lands on the other leg and starts
Yeah.
screaming and like, oh man, come on, dude. But you got to take the bitter with the sweet with the Sandman. But yeah, that match is just incredible.
Yeah.
I would not watch the post match though. Don't watch the post match.
I've what it does it involve Blue Meanie?
No, it involves Missy Hyatt, Francine, the Pitbulls, and the
Oh, that's
Sandman,
right.
and
They
they're
like
trying to
offer,
trade the
yeah,
women to
Missy
each
Hyatt.
other,
Yeah,
and it's
super weird. Yeah, I
fast
remember that.
forward city, baby. Just,
Yeah, that
just so
match though is just that's like peak to just we've talked about like the reckless brawl well, where it's just guys throwing their bodies at each other and the spot where Pitbull and Sandman do like the table bridge on the top rope and go
Hmm.
for whatever it is they're gonna go for, and it just falls right down.
Oh, that's right. They both just crash to the ground, and
Oh my
Sandman
god.
falls on his head on the concrete. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great.
Just
It's got a dive sequence in it. Raven and Sandman busted a dive sequence in their match, and I just you mentioned the DDT on the guardrail, but like all of the near falls at the end of that match, like Sandman's getting near falls off like schoolboys, and just the crowd is the maybe the hottest in
the
ECW
false
history.
finishes, like the false finish
Yeah.
on the Stevie kick, where Stevie nails Raven and Sandman ducks. Oh my
Yeah.
god, I'm gonna have to watch this later
So
tonight.
good. It's great. Like I remember you putting it over to me, and I was kind of like, all right, sounds fine, and like blew me away. Blew me away with how good it was.
So one match I will not be putting over, and it is Criminal is number 19, Jack Swagger versus Christian.
It's a hell of a match, man.
I will never know. Will never know. At least you put Taz, Tanaka, and Awesome is better than that. Okay.
Yep.
And number 17 is the only one I will approve on here, which is the Big Show versus Ric Flair in their thumbtack death match they had on TV.
Yeah,
So
oh,
if you
man.
ever hear about WWE complaining about the violence of AEW, they did thumbtack death match bloody Ric Flair on TV, and that was when Ric Flair was just whoosh, just going coast to coast every single time. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Oops, that's my list. Oh
He
no.
would
But
he would come out for like pull apart brawls as a member of Evolution, and he was just coast to
shoo.
coast with the blade
So,
for
he's got the
for the
white shirt on
last 2 minutes of Raw, just everywhere. Yeah, that match is barbaric though. It's uncomfortable. It's great. And you know what too? Like for as much as people can shit on Big Show as ECW champion, which I totally get, like you got to think though, how much did the ECW crowd love Sid? So I mean, realistically, like
But
Big
Sid was
Show,
awesome. And Sid
but
showed up and he powerbombed people and he left. And that you gave the people what they want and you didn't give them anything more.
yeah. So the difference was he was power bombing people and choke slamming them through tables. So now you have the Big Show choke slamming through people through tables and choke slamming them on thumbtacks. I think it would have gotten over. I
Let,
think.
let me tell you a story. So ECW is doing a house show on like July 11th, 2006 in Racine, Wisconsin. So me and my friends were super hyped. We got front row tickets. They were only like $35. The place sold out in like 20 minutes. But it was CM Punk had just gone on the brand, but he hadn't debuted on TV yet. And RVD was coming and Sabu. And it was like, all right, this is going to be cool. Well, July 4th, everything changes in ECW. RVD's gone. Now Big Show's the big bad guy, and now Sabu's going to be fighting him. So I got to see Big Show versus Sabu live. Went to see that ECW house show. It went an hour and 50 minutes with an intermission, and they had a bikini contest. I mean, did get to see what's her face, Kelly in a bikini. So that was good. But I mean, Big Show versus Sabu was just such a trash garbage match.
So you didn't even get the SmackDown portion of the house show. So yours was just straight up ECW.
It was straight up ECW. Yeah, it was when they did
Wow.
house shows for like a month or like
Yeah.
that 2 week period. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool
So
building, great setup. And
So
then
this is where I think, for better or worse, that we get to punch our ECW fan cards, because I also went to an ECW house show, but it was co-branded with SmackDown. But I chose to go to that event instead of going to the very good Unforgiven 2006 pay-per-view in Toronto with the Cena Edge TLC match. So
whoops.
instead, I crossed the border to go to Buffalo to watch an ECW SmackDown house show. But the Sandman put me through a chair, so that's the
Oh,
story I got coming out of that. He was doing him and Tommy Dreamer like worked like Test and Mike Knox or something, and
oh
like an
yeah, that was
extreme
what I
rules
got too.
match.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they were doing their exit through the crowd, and so I was second row, and the chair I was sitting on was like really wobbly all night, and I was like, this chair sucks, but whatever. So Sandman came over the rail and he put his hand on my shoulder and then went to step on my chair, and the
Mhm.
chair collapsed. But Sandman ended up falling on top of me like a crossbody, and somehow the chair ended up behind my back. So I got crossbodied through a chair by the 250-pound drunken Sandman. So
Did he say anything?
said, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah,
And then
that checks out.
security brought me a new chair. I figured maybe I could have complained and got a T-shirt out of the deal, but it was still kind of cool for me that the Sandman, fell on me through a chair and it hurt. But I mean, I'm hardcore too, so
Hey,
there
you
you
got to
go.
give some to get some, you know?
Yeah.
All right, Guerrero and Malenko in a 4:15:95, which I believe is the Hostile City
Hostile City.
Showdown.
Yeah.
I mean, back then I loved that match. You know, when I first started seeing it, I thought that was great. Now I don't know. I haven't really watched it in a long time, but most of their stuff I found pretty good. I think this is their best match that they had. They had a few other pretty good ones, but this was easily their best.
I
But
agree. I got raked through the coals a little bit on Twitter by Rob Naylor and some others because when I was doing this rewatch, I watched all of their matches, including the house show matches, right? Because they did like the Guerrero Malenko Classic on a bunch of house shows, right? Where they did like a best of 3 in different cities and whatnot.
yeah,
Um,
the Malenko Guerrero Classic.
yeah, and those, I mean, just being shot on a fan cam, watching the grainy stuff, years later, not being able to hear the crowd, they they really didn't hold up for me. So I kind of made the generalization of like, yeah, the Malenko Guerrero matches not as good in 2020 as they were in '95, and I kind of got attacked a little bit, saying, oh, they're masterpieces. This match by far the best they did, and the thing that I really like about this match, which seems like a weird thing to kind of like about a match. But something happens in the crowd during this match. There's like an altercation, and the crowd like starts yelling with it, amongst themselves, right? Like infighting. And Guerrero and Malenko, they just like slow it right down. They don't like let it throw them off at all, and they work the crowd right back into the match. And like they start to like they slow it down, kind of let the crowd get out there, fuck you, chants to each other, whatever. And then they ramp the pace right up beautifully,
You,
and they get the crowd hooked in a standing ovation at the end of the match. So, and
you see,
you have the what dreads like pointing at the ring, telling like the crowd to watch the match, watch the match. So that's kind of a nice little visual there too. That guy's something else.
do you ever hear the story about him doing training?
No.
Yeah, he wanted to train to be a wrestler. So he trained, he showed up for the first day. I guess it was just a normal day. He left and like he never came back, like to a show or to training, like
Was it
gone.
like House of Hardcore? Like he
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Like
Wow.
one day and he's just like, well, fuck this
He
forever.
saw Taz T-Bone suplex Chris Chetty through the wall, and it's like, no, I'm
This is
out.
what I do to my nephew or my cousin or whatever the
Yeah,
fuck he was.
there's I remember like reading stories about like a lot of those ECW arena like faithful fans like back in the day, and he like apparently he stunk to high heavens. Like he'd always be there with no shirt on. Apparently like he just reeked. But like he'd like have like mud and stuff on his head that he said was like from like the Ganges, river, and like I guess he was like a really weird like spiritual guy. Strange dude. And he'd always do the Sabu point.
Well, wherever you are, Dreads, we're thinking about you. So Scorpio Sabu, that's another great one that I'm going to use to leap off of a match that I wish was on here, which is Stevie Richards versus Sabu from House Party '96. Just love
Ah.
that match because just it's the performance of Stevie's life at that point, maybe ever in the singles match at least. And yeah, that one is just awesome. Not the Scorpio Sabu isn't awesome; it's awesome in its own way, but it's exactly what you think a Scorpio Sabu match would be, which is great. Well, I think the Stevie and Sabu match is just like one of those that you're like, huh? How that? Like you would think it was just going to be a squash,
Yep.
and Stevie just actually shows some guts for the first time ever. He does get destroyed by Sabu and does end up getting carried out by Meanie because he's dead. But it was like one of those first times. It's like, oh, okay, Stevie's got some guts. And he wasn't being saved by Raven or by one of the Dudleys or anything like that. It was just him.
You know what? And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Stevie Richards deserves to be in the top 5 of just phenomenal ECW performers. But he will never be included on that list by most people.
No,
Because
no.
he doesn't have the resume when it comes to actual matches, despite the fact he's involved in the greatest ECW match of all time. Um, you mentioned like that Sabu matches, like he has these little like glimpses, but just everything else he did and the importance he had as Raven's lackey, and just that like juxtaposition between Raven being so serious and Stevie Richards like adding that like goofiness factor to it, made the whole package. he was amazing.
Yeah, the Dancing Stevie Richards character from like 95 through, I guess really the end of it would be November to Remember 96 is really one of the best things top to bottom in ECW history.
Mm-hmm.
Raven is great, but just adding a great Stevie Richards into that package just makes it, that much greater.
Do you feel that he should have won the title in 97?
No.
No, you don't think so?
Not at that point. Not at that point. If he had stuck around, sure. I mean, maybe, but like I think Terry Funk was a great choice for Barely Legal 97. It was a great story, and getting him off him soon after that was also good. In my mind's eye, I don't think Stevie Richards, at least at that point, was championship material. But if I would have been the booker back then, instead of having Bam Bam Bigelow beat Douglas for the title in fall of 97, I would have just had it be Taz and just start the Taz reign right there.
Yeah,
If anything, they waited too long. They waited another year and a half to put the belt on Taz. And then 6 months later, he's like, all right. So, yeah, I don't know how the hell I got on that, but that's my opinion.
No, I agree fully, especially with Taz winning the title. I feel like Barely Legal, the BWO. Yeah, I wasn't crazy about the BWO myself, but I feel like they were a hot enough act that Stevie, being the one to dethrone Raven and finally stand on his own 2 feet, would have made for like a fun little reign, and then they could have bumped the title over to Shane or whatever they were going to do. I love, in hindsight, like I love that Terry Funk story and that he got that moment at Barely Legal, but given that they would end up kind of hot potatoing the belt along anyways and doing the switch to Sabu only to then drop it back, drop it to Douglas, and then the Bam Bam switch. I don't see why Stevie couldn't have gotten a little 1 or 2 month reign in there before he ultimately ended up leaving. But,
yeah.
right.
Well, I mean, he left, so in the end, it's kind of like, and then his career kind of got a little weird there for a while till he went to the WWF. Crazy to Jerry, that's got to be the Mexican death match, right?
100%. Yep.
Damn right. Oh, that's such a great match. The spike. What's that one? He slides the chair. He's sliding the chair across the table, and he's ducking, and
it flies like right into the crowd. It's so good.
Oh man, that's
talking about
awesome.
Sadika throwing light tubes into the crowd. Well, here's Yoshihiro Tajiri throwing chairs into the crowd. 20 years ago.
If you go to a death match show and you've not been hit with a full light tube, I mean, just. Well, what are you doing? I mean,
you haven't lived.
That's just no. It goes with the territory. I remember Orrin Veitz wrestling Eddie Only in ICW Milwaukee, and of course I'm sitting there in the cramped front row, and he just hits him with a light tube, and the whole thing just bonk, just bounces and shatters on my leg, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is
I've got a scar on my hand from IWS uneffing sanctioned 2007, let's say, where they did Fans Bring the Weapons and no barricades, front row, and the traditional IWS bang the mat. And I'd had more than a few beers, and I was banging the mat and not realizing that a light tube bundle was moving closer and closer just through me banging the mat, and I banged my hand
right through it,
right on the broken light tubes. Yep. And then after the show, we stuck around and met some of the wrestlers, and my hand is bleeding profusely, and I'm like, hi PCP crazy effing Manny, I'm T-Mac with my bloody ass hand.
Yeah. Blood is splattering everywhere.
Yeah, IWS.
Those were the days. See, I could never bring a weapon to a death match because I was always worried that if somebody got hurt with my weapon, I'd feel really bad.
Well, I did a thumbtack cricket bat, a big plastic cricket bat for one of the Tournament of Deaths, and Necro fought Brain Damage, and Brain Damage hit Necro in the stomach with it. But I super glued all of the thumbtacks onto the cricket bat.
They weren't going anywhere.
They weren't going anywhere, and I the same thing. I saw just Necro's stomach after it. I felt so bad. I thought, yeah, next time white glue instead.
Looking back on it, oh well.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Necro.
Yep.
The only weapon I ever brought was for the 2003 King of the Death matches, where I brought a 4-pack of Angel Soft toilet paper. My friend brought a Bible from the hotel.
There we go.
Ian got very mad about that. He was not happy that there was a Bible being used as a weapon.
Ian Rotten, man of God.
Yes. Oh, love him so much. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that Mexican death match is just awesome. Dreamer Miguel Cuddy versus RVD and Bill Alfonso. I mean, that's just a classic match right there.
Yeah,
I just always like wonder what if Fonzie had worn like white that day.
I know. It's
Like, his
the
black shirt, you
hindsight
can
of it.
just tell is just gooed up in blood, just top to bottom, and just the way he's just looking at the the hard cam, being like, "Yeah, end the match, please."
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's incredible, and just like the ending visual of Beulah, like the Nike sports bra covered in Fonzie's blood, just throwing up like the Tommy Dreamer. It's so
mhm.
good. It's so good.
And it does start off like as a real clunker because it's that tag team match. Tommy Dreamer's foot is hurt, and
Oh,
RVD like it's like I'm just gonna leave because I don't feel like wrestling today,
yeah.
or whatever the
The
fuck it
well,
was.
the story of that match too, like it basically saving Fonzie's job at
Hmm.
ECW, like it just adds to the legend of it. Of basically
Yes,
like, yeah, this guy and Todd Gordon, they were the moles in the locker room. They were gonna get, and this guy just goes coast to coast to save his, to save his job. It's incredible.
my other favorite Fonzie story is when he broke his arm at an ECW show, and then he went to the grocery store across the street, and then threw a bunch of cans on top of himself and fell, and then collected the insurance money. I believe I got that one from the Raven Sandman shoot interview,
Uh,
so I didn't make that up. They might have, but I
Bill
didn't.
Alfonso, we love you. God bless you.
Oh, his lips are turning blue, Daddy.
Yeah,
My God.
we need 2 cc's of adrenaline stat.
I just saw the Wizard of Oz last week. Oh, speaking of Raven Dreamer 6797, which is their final ECW
Yeah.
WrestlePalooza 97 match, and really the last match they ever had in ECW, which is crazy because he was back for like a year and a half, and they didn't do one
That
match.
that whole Raven return period is so weird to me. Um,
Everybody's burnt out. It's over. Like,
that's it. Like it feels so hollow. I don't know what ultimately they were going with. I don't know what the drug situation was at that point, but like it,
good.
yeah, well, shit. Bad for the fan, good for the wrestlers. But that whole
When you can
period is so
almost kill the Sandman, those are some good drugs.
100%. But yeah, this match I think is by far the best match they ever had with each other. It's just for how much I love that feud. I feel like the actual matches were never that great. They all had these little moments that would tie into the story, but like from an actual bell to bell standpoint, but this one they work like a really like heated opening brawl, and it's less of I'll drag you by the hair around the crowd. I'll grab the frying pan from this fan and hit you with that. And it's more of a we're gonna punch each other bloody and slam each other on the bleachers and throw each other off the bleachers through tables, and like it really felt like this heated big match feel grudge match. Joey Styles, again, it was him and Rude on commentary, so I mean Rick Rude, kind of added whatever it was that he was adding at the time, but Joey
I
was
love to
great.
give Francine a rude awakening, Joey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why don't you come here and sit on my lap, Francine? But Joey Styles was incredible in this match, just because they do all of these little things that like tie into all of the moments early on in their feud. And I had the luxury of I had just watched the entire run up into this point, so it was fresh in my mind. But Joey Styles is so good at just doing the callbacks, where if you're
Mhm.
watching this match, not having seen the stuff at all or not having seen it for years, it's like, oh yeah, I remember when they used Beulah sprayed hairspray in Tommy's eyes when on the night she debuted, right at the I think it was at three-way dance. But they do all of these little things and they build it up, and it's great. And the satisfaction of Tommy finally getting that pinfall over Raven was came off really well. And then all of the post match, not that I kind of tie that into the match itself, but I feel that the episode of Hardcore TV where they show this match, they show Taz and Sabu, and they show Taz and Shane is 100% bar none the best episode of any wrestling TV program ever.
Yep.
It's the matches are good, everything's hot, it's shocking, it's great, it's absolute perfection. Even though I think the whole WWF Invasion storyline kind of went down the tubes a little bit and ultimately didn't really amount to too much. That first night at WrestlePalooza is amazing.
Oh yeah, and plus the WrestlePalooza match has lupus in it, and I mean, Really, you can't put a price on lupus. Picking his nose.
Yeah.
Lupus. The funny thing is, they don't even introduce him on TV. Or like, hey,
I
here's a new
know.
guy. He's just fucking there one day. Like, who the fuck is this? God, he could have at least gotten the Musketeer, you know? But for me, like, I don't think I would call that my favorite Raven. They're all kind of my favorites to like my children. But if I really love, like, they have a Florida one in '95 where one of their first Florida trips down there, and they fight all over the damn place, and it's bloody, and Raven's doing running drop kicks on the floor, like just not caring at all, in his big bloody Skid Row shirt, and that's fucking awesome. And also, of course, the three-way dance is great just for the finish, and Hostile City Showdown the same as well, as each of them learn how to bleed.
Yeah.
Tommy Dreamer having to go into the back room to have somebody cut him and then come back out of the room. Oh, things were so simple back then,
Yeah.
So yeah, awesome Dudley. Oh, guilty as charged. Like, yeah, I mean, it's a spectacle. That's a hell of a spectacle.
Yeah.
I'll say that much. Now, as a match, yeah. So let's go up to number 4, Mysterio Psychosis from was that Gangsta's Paradise?
No, that's not the Gangster's Paradise. That's the 2 out of 3 falls from Hardcore TV.
Oh,
Only
okay.
Gangster's Paradise. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Gangsta's Paradise is September.
Yeah. Yeah. Gangster's Paradise is the 10-minute sprint. This is the 2 out of 3 falls where Extreme Lucha Libre is officially introduced because they start using chairs and tables.
See, I love that stuff in the ECW there, and also they had a tag team match where I think it was Ray and Hoovy against Psychosis and La Parca, and that was just fucking badass. I think that's the one where Psychosis bashes his face
and just splits his head. Yeah.
All my favorite ECW matches are the ones where people got injured. So
says a lot about you as a person.
Well, it does. It does. I mean, they didn't get hurt seriously. I'm not like Over the Edge '99 is not my favorite pay-per-view.
No.
Just saying. So now Foley, Edge, Lita versus Dreamer, Funk, and Beulah. I mean, number 2, the sacrilege of all of that is pretty, high. Even though that is a crazy type of match, also to me that's kind of a messy match. I really don't know if I've watched it back since it aired, but I remember Funk going in the back, coming back out, and there's some barbed wire, and there may be a fire spot, and it just seemed like everything that they had done in that like Foley match at WrestleMania, but more.
And that's kind of how it is. But it blew me away watching this.
I mean, it shouldn't be on the list in the first place.
Wow. So at the time, like One Night Stand 2006, I remember thinking like, oh, that was sweet. But watching it now, you're gonna get pissed off by this comment, but it almost feels like the sequel to the November to Remember '95 match, where it's like you have all of these guys. Raven couldn't be there for whatever reason, so Foley drags poor Edge into it, who is completely out of his element. The crowd is crazy hot. I consider it to be somewhat of an ECW crowd because it's it's One Night Stand. It's before WWE bastardizes ECW too badly. But like Foley is so good in this match. He cuts a promo beforehand where he comes out and he's like, I've been saying a lot of bad things about ECW, on the television leading up into this, but I want everybody to know, there was a time that I really loved ECW. What was the golden era of ECW? Of course, I'm talking about, when Stephanie McMahon brought ECW back, and he goes like, "Long live the Alliance!" And it's so good, and the crowd just like turns on him perfectly. The spots they do here are just like Terry Funk just beats the hell out of Mick Foley the entire match. He takes a bump off the top of a ladder where he teases that he's going to do the moonsault, and he just gets the ladder tipped back, and he like lands on his back at 65 or however old he is in this match. They do fire, they do barbed wire. There's just buckets and buckets of blood. Edge is so scummy, like pinning Beulah, in like a sex position at the end. It's just it's all, but it all feels chaotic, which WWF never does well because it all feels so like sanitized, but not this match. You have Terry Funk walking through the crowd, bleeding all over the place, carrying like a barbed wire board in his hand. And it's like, you would never see that on a straight up WWE show, that they would take that risk. And it will surprise you if you watch it now.
All right.
If Gangster's Paradise didn't hold up as well as it did, this would have been my number one, and I know how upsetting that would have been, but it really is that good. And it feels like ECW, more so than any of the other One Night Stand stuff they did, more so than anything at One Night Stand 2005. This feels like an ECW match. Give it a shot. Give it a whirl.
I'll watch it, but it's still.
Do you have the Peacock? Could you pull it up on the Peacock?
I can pull it up. I can pull it up on the Peacock if my wife is not watching murder shows on it.
There you go.
They have a lot of murder shows, like a lot. So, all right. So number one, of course, we talked about it a little bit, but Raven Richards versus the Pitbulls, Gangsta's Paradise, 9/16/95. The greatest match in ECW history, probably my favorite match of all time. Yeah, my favorite match of all time. Everything just builds to it perfectly and pays off perfectly, and the bad guys don't lose anything out of it, and the good guys are the big gigantic heroes. And yeah, I mean, what else can you say? If you haven't seen it, I can't really explain it to you. But if you have seen it, it's like the old Jeff Jarrett saying, if no explanation is ever good enough, if you don't want it explained. Or I fucked that up really bad. Wow. Never mind. I can't be Jeff Jarrett.
Few people can.
Conrad.
But no, it's like, and we talked about this earlier, but it is absolutely the match that it's made so much better by watching the TV around it and seeing all of the different storylines pay off to these finishes, but also like keeping doors open for things to continue. You have, the Raven Stevie story that comes out of it. You get the tease of Tommy pinning Raven, only to have that pull. That is the best part of the match to me. Where
Bill Alfonso is right too. He is not in the match. That pin does not count.
And that's the best part about it, because like as much as you hate Bill Alfonso, you're like, shit, he's right? Like that's always the best heel, where like you hate them because of how they are, but they have that point where you're like, I can't argue it. Now I just want to see someone beat his ass, right? Like I can't argue your point, so I'll do it with violence. Like
he does. He does immediately bury himself though when Big Dick Dudley gives Tommy Dreamer the choke slam, and he's like, "All right, choke slam's on." And as soon as he does that, the crowd just loses their minds. And 5 seconds later, Frankenstein plays, and if you're gonna see the match, don't watch it on the network. Just find it elsewhere. It's elsewhere. You can find it.
You can find that stuff easily. If you can't find it, message me on Twitter and I will put it in your hands, because yeah, you need it with the uncut, original music. And it's like, I love when things are obvious, but it doesn't make them bad. Because like you said, the second he's like, I'm lifting the band on the choke slam, 911 is coming out and finally hitting that choke slam on Bill Alfonso. And it doesn't matter that it's obvious, because you want to see it so desperately. It's perfect.
And the thing, I guess we can wrap up our conversation by kind of looking at today, and like AEW is not doing anything like that's off the wall, or, oh wow, this is a brilliant concept that nobody's ever thought of before. No, it's simple storylines where they lead you in a direction and then they pay off that direction. Once in a while they will swerve you, but that swerve is going into a direction. So I mean, and that was so much of ECW right there. It was just making smart decisions when they counted. You can have all the crazy shit you want around it, but when you make the basic solid decisions at the right times, then fans are going to be happy.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is probably the best way that we can end this. So I'll give you a plug. You can follow my friend Jason on Twitter at AKA Max Power. You can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube so that you don't miss a video. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50. And please join us again tomorrow as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50.
5-0.
Top 50.